Hi, I'm Beth Bonness, host of the Thought Echoes podcast, where we explore how we engage with our thoughts and appreciate their ripple effects and entanglements, especially with those we love and interact with the most. In this episode, I'm joined by neurologist and brain health advocate, Dr. Majid Fotuhi. He's author of The Invincible Brain, a powerful call to action for any of us wanting to know how we too can become super-agers, living well into our 90s and staying sharp and independent. If you're curious about how you can become a super-ager or stave off dementia and Alzheimer's, this conversation is for you. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, Dr. Majid. It's so nice to meet you, and I'm so excited to talk to you about the Invincible Brain and learn so much more about it. Can you tell me why you retired from your practice to write this book?
For 30 years, I've been seeing patients with different levels of memory and Alzheimer's disease. And for the past 15 years, I had developed a brain fitness program, which did amazing for our patients with memory loss, ADHD, brain fog, or early stage of Alzheimer's disease. At some point, my practice was so busy, we were open 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 7 days a week. And I realized that there was a need for the program that I had developed. So I decided that instead of seeing a few thousand patients in Northern Virginia near Washington, D.C., where I work, it is better for me to make this program available for people everywhere in the world. And that means to work on an app, an online course, writing a book, and really spending my life on public education. This was an important decision for me, and I'm so glad I made that decision. I am now an adjunct professor at Johns Hopkins University, where I teach students about neuroplasticity and how we can improve our brain at any age. And in my book, I talk about all the things that shrink the brain and all the things that grow the brain and how the five pillars of brain health can rejuvenate your brain. So I'm excited about this new chapter in my life where instead of seeing patients 9 hours a day, I spend a lot of time on interviews, giving public lectures, teaching students, and really educating the world that we can slow the effects of aging on our brain, and it is possible to become a brain super-ager. It is possible to reach the age of 90 and be sharp and independent.
As I said before we started the interview, all things brain, everybody's excited with all things brain. And I'd say maybe 20 years ago, when I wasn't at the age I was now, looking at my parents and my grandparents, there was a sense of, oh, I'm not going to be like them because I'm healthier. I've made different lifestyle choices and whatnot. But there was always kind of this nagging, at some point, uh, nature is going to take its course and I'm going to slam up against a wall. So it's so encouraging in the last decade or so, at least my kind of tapping into the science that's going on around the brain. It's so encouraging to know that we can actually do something about it and that it's not just all about your genes, not that there isn't a contribution that plays, but that there's some empowerment that comes with that. So I'm really excited to talk to you about all the different, tips we can do. And I know this is just the tip of the iceberg because there's a lot more in your book and the app and whatnot. But I'm hoping to whet people's appetite so that people are going to want to jump on that. So I'm excited to talk more about this.
You're
Can
absolutely right. I think the genes play a small role on whether or not you develop dementia late in life. They play a strong role when people develop early onset Alzheimer's disease. So if you've had parents who develop Alzheimer's disease in their 50s, that is a concern. But if you have parents or grandparents who develop Alzheimer's disease in their 80s and 90s, your risk is only 2% higher than it would have been otherwise. And if you have healthy lifestyles, you reduce your risk 16-fold, which really by far overcome any genetic predispositions. So I think that as long as you follow the five pillars of brain health, which we'll talk about shortly, you really can set the goal of reaching age of 90 and being sharp and independent.
Love that. Love that. Love that. Can you tell us more about how brains are integrated wholes and how much the different parts of the brains, how they kind of work simultaneously? Can you talk about that?
Yes, I'm fascinated by how our brain works. See, there's an outer layer of the brain called the cortex. And this outer layer is like a blanket that covers all other brain structures inside. And then there are two brain structures that are important for learning and memory. It's called hippocampus. You have one hippocampus on the right and one hippocampus on the left. The hippocampus is roughly the size of your thumb. So the cortex is important for your higher cognitive functions. It's important for your ability to read, write, type, cook, do your taxes, plan things. That's so much of its cortex. And then when you learn something new, so for example, let's say you learn how to spell my name, that you use your hippocampus. So cortex and hippocampus are important for your cognitive abilities. Now, cortex has different areas. They look different neighborhoods. So parts of the cortex are more active for speaking or understanding language. Parts of the cortex are more active when you handle numbers. So we've learned that your brain works as a group of networks. So for example, it's a network for language that has 8 or 10 areas within the cortex and the hippocampus. So imagine 8 or 10 little patches of cortex and two little three pieces of hippocampus. They form a team. And this team is important for language. So when you listen or when you talk, this language network is active. When your language network is active, the part of brain for numbers is just sitting there. They're not silent, but they're just sitting there. The part of your brain for balance is just sitting there. And it's the team for language that's active. Now, that's how it works. So you have networks, teams of brain areas, especially cortex hippocampus, that work together to make sense of language. And there's a network for attention. There's a network for motor functions. So let's say you learn to crochet, or let's say you learn piano. So when you do that, then the other team that's involved for coordination of your fingers and movement of your fingers and following the notes is active. And the part of the brain that understands and speaks English, it's not so active. So you have all these teams sitting there doing their jobs. And at some point, a node in one team may be also a node of a different team. So each node is not just for one team. So that's how it works. And it's beautiful. Oh my God, it's so fascinating how our brain is set up to function like that. But what's even more fascinating, what's is just astonishing, is this. As sophisticated as cortex and hippocampus is, as complicated as all these networks are, all of them can change. I mean, oh my God, how does that happen? So, for example, the language part of our brain, this network that I talked to, this little mosaic of patches of cortex that have billions of neurons firing and talking to each other, can grow. You can increase the number of connections between these neuron populations. You can increase the activity of these neurons in different parts of the language network, and you can literally physically grow the size of this network. Let's say it's an inch, it can be an inch and an eighth of an inch bigger, literally. So when we do MRIs, we can capture this increase in the volume of the brain when you learn a new language, when you learn to juggle three balls in the air, when you learn to play the piano. And this, oh my God, I mean, I teach a whole course about what I just told you, advances in neuroplasticity and its applications in neurology. That's the course I teach at Hopkins. And I give 28 lectures about them. So don't get me started.
So I'm imagining that when you talk about adding more, are they also, because I'm seeing this physical network, like these threads or tendrils. So is it the quantity that increases, or it's the actual mass of each one of the tendrils, or it's a combination of both?
Yeah. So let's say your hippocampus is the size of your thumb, and now it's a little bit bigger. It's about 4 millimeters bigger. Okay. So what's in that 4 millimeters? So there are four things that constitute that extra volume. Number one, there's increased number of blood vessels.
Okay.
See, the blood vessels in the brain can grow. You can have like a new branches of a tree. They can literally grow and form new little blood vessels. And as they form new blood vessels, the blood goes right through them. It's like forming new roads, and then they go right to them. The second thing is that there are increased number of connections. So they're like fiber bundles, like
Mm-hmm.
these are axons that go from point A to point B. You can have, instead of having 1,000, you can have 1,050. So you have increased number of ropes. Not only the blood vessels that supply the nutrient
Mm-hmm.
for these things happening, and then this number of ropes. The third thing is there's increased number of synapses. So synapses are the tips of these branches of these fiber bundles where the neurons connect to each other. So the more connections there are, let's say in the language network, the better your vocabulary, the more articulate you are. So this number of synapses can increase. And the fourth one is increased number of neurons. So hippocampus is the main part of the brain where new neurons are born with exercise, especially at any age, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. So those four things, number of blood vessels, number of connections, number of synapses, and number of neurons are the things that constitute the actual increase in brain volume that we can see with naked eye on brain MRIs.
There's a competitive part of me that wants to get an MRI and do a baseline. I wish I had one earlier, but to do a baseline and then, as you're going to talk about the five pillars, to do a check-in. I mean, we go in and have blood work kind of done on a regular basis. Is the technology around brain blood work, which isn't right, but I mean, in terms of doing a check-in on your brain where an fMRI is kind of the tool to do that, is that going to become more commonplace so that we can see how we're progressing?
That's something I envision happening in the future where we can have based on MRIs and then do another MRI in patients or individuals without any problems 3 or 6 months later. This is what we did in my practice. So we treated patients with mild cognitive impairment, which is a stage between normal and Alzheimer's disease. And what we discovered was that when our patients completed our 12-week program, the hippocampus grew.
Mm,
Half the patients increased the volume of the hippocampus by 1 to 3% in just 3 months.
wow.
I mean, usually the brain shrinks with aging. On average, the cortex and hippocampus shrink by about 1% per year
Hmm.
after age 50 on average, and that's an important distinguishing factor. So if you don't do anything particular, you just live life and you just slow down with aging, as a lot of people do, your brain will shrink by 10% in 10 years.
Mm.
However,
Oh.
if you are someone like me who knows about the five pillars of brain health and does everything according to those, your brain will be the same or slightly larger 10 years later.
Mhm.
And if you are someone who is particularly on the other end, where no exercise, junk food, stress a lot, drink a lot of beer, your brain will shrink 2 to 3% per year
Mm.
over time. So this is what excited me to see patients because patient after patient I saw that people will come back and say, "Oh my God, I'm so much sharper. I feel like I'm my brain back. I'm myself again." A lot of people who start at a slippery slope of forgetting names and repeating
Mhm.
themselves feel it's over. They feel like this is
Right.
it. They're going to get Alzheimer's disease and they're going to be put in a nursing home and they're going to hate life.
And there's
And
nothing
what
I
they
can do
don't
about it.
and they don't realize that no, 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 this is not how it works. Your brain has neuroplasticity. Your brain has an innate ability to change. Your brain can grow and your brain can shrink. And it's your choices on a daily basis that determines which way your brain would go. Shrink and rust and just go down the drain, or thrive, grow, and blossom. And
Love it, love it.
these are not theoretical. And that's what's I find exciting about my book. I really put out all these potential risk factors. I have like a list of 40 questions for people to discover their profile, what I call a brain profile. I put all I've learned over the past 30 years into these chapters in the book to help people identify what are the things that are shrinking their brain and how much of the things that grow the brain are they doing and what's the balance. And then I think that when people are educated and when people have an aha moment,
Mhm.
they do change their lifestyle.
Right.
See, if you come home after work, you're tired, your tendency is just sit in front of a TV, eat something, and just veg until you fall asleep, and hopefully you sleep through the night, maybe not. But if you knew that 45 minutes of walking can make a huge difference in your brain, then after you eat, you go for a walk. You don't just, sit in the couch and just sit there. You
Mhm.
get up from sofa and you walk. And then when you do that every day, there are anatomical changes in the brain. These are not abstract thoughts. It's not like saying there's a change in energy in the brain, or these are not abstract thoughts. These are actual physical changes in the brain.
Quick question. If somebody exercises during the day, and so when you talk about that 45-minute walk, is it the 45-minute walk sometime during the day, or there's something special or ma not magical, but there's something that is more significant by doing it after, kind of early evening after you eat?
No, as long as you walk 3 to 5,000 steps a day, you reduce the biomarkers of Alzheimer's disease in the brain. One of the revolutionary things in my field in the past 2 years have been the discovery of blood biomarkers. You know how you can have blood tests and look at your
Mhm.
cholesterol levels. Amazingly, scientists in the field of Alzheimer's disease have been able to develop blood tests that measure the amount of plaques and tangles in the brain. So in the brain, there's accumulation of these proteins called amyloid and tau at a microscopic level. And scientists have been able to measure the little of those amount that leak in the blood and go through the blood circulation and then measure it and have such sophisticated, precise measurements of these to correlate the amount that are measured in blood to the measured levels in the brain very closely. And so some studies have shown that when people walk 3 to 5,000 steps a day, they reduce the amount of plaques and tangles in the brain by measurement of blood biomarkers.
And is that
And
that would be, I would suspect, cheaper to do that kind of blood work than it would be to request an MRI?
yes, so there are three ways you can look at the brain and see how much plaques and tangles you have and how much brain shrinkage you have. One way is to do a blood test. These blood tests check for plaques and tangles and inflammation in the brain. So, for example, the blood test can tell you about the health of the blood vessels in your brain.
Hmm.
Your blood vessels may have been shriveled or they may have been like a rusty pipes, but this blood test will not see those. The blood test only see the plaques and tangles. And then you have a PET scan where they give you special ligands injected, and these are radio-labeled ligands that go to the brain, and then you do imaging, and then they can see how much of these plaques and tangles you have. Again, they don't tell you about the size of the brain, they just say how much plaques and tangles you have. The advantage of MRI is that you can see the brain physically. You can see if it's smaller or bigger, if the hippocampus is shriveled or not shriveled. You can see the effects of, small strokes, how many small strokes you have.
Hmm.
So ideally, you can just get a brain MRI and you know it. But the blood tests are so much more convenient. You can just get a drop of blood from the tip of your finger and know the level of plaques and tangles. So in terms of logistics, it's a lot simpler to do a blood test. It takes 5 minutes and it's covered by Medicare, so it's pretty cheap and accessible. I think you could just set measures for yourself, you know, I think you can say how fit I am. And then, I can walk 5 miles or I can walk 3 miles. I'm going to set a goal to walk 1 more mile.
Mm.
Or how many flights of stairs can I go without stopping and try to increase it one notch? Or set a goal for eating healthy. So the five pillars of brain health are fitness, diet, sleep, stress reduction, and brain training. Each of those five factors determine your brain health. And if you want to be a brain super-ager, if you want to, set the goal of reaching the age of 90 and be sharp and independent, you focus on all five elements every day. You eat right, you try not to stress, you walk 3 to 5,000 steps a day, and you do some brain training. It doesn't take too much time, actually. And if you do all those things, then you're set. You don't even need to have independent um, markers for your progress. But if you want to, you could check those as well. I think you just should focus on, doing the things that we know are good for you.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. One of the things that, and that's, it's so empowering because those are not five, excuse me, those are not five difficult things to do. And so having the feedback in terms of what you've seen in your practice, and how successful that's been in terms of seeing progress with people, I think that'll be very encouraging to a lot of people I know. I loved
Yes,
reading how,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
I just want to mention one thing. These things I'm telling you about changes in the brain and patients improving are not just my observations. We published these findings in three scientific peer-reviewed journals, and we have scientific evidence for the effectiveness of this 12-week program. So it's not, again, believe me, it works. Has gone through rigorous scientific evaluation and is solid evidence that these five pillars of brain health make a huge difference in your brain functions.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yes, I do know that those were peer-reviewed research results, so that's great. One of the things I loved reading about in your book was how thoughts are emotions. Can you elaborate on what you meant by that or explain that more?
Yes. See, we talked about how the brain works and how there is a network of different brain structures that work together as a team. So there's a team of brain areas that are particularly important for our emotions. So if somebody says something to you that hurts your feelings, it's not your heart that's getting hurt, it's a change in level of activity in these parts of the brain that are making you feel the way you do. And then you have your thoughts. Like, are you a Democrat or Republican? Are you believing in God or you think there is no God? Are you, generally speaking, a positive person and thinks that every day something good's going to happen? Or you are more of a pessimistic person and thinks, bad things are going to happen today? Those are your thoughts. But these thoughts and emotions parts of the brain overlap. So it's not like you have only a part of brain that's for thoughts and part of brain for emotions. There's overlap of these. And so you can use your thoughts to then guide your emotions. For example, let's say your spouse does something that annoys you. Let's say he eats and he chews loudly and it annoys you, right? So when you feel annoyed, is your emotional part of brain, the emotional network being activated. You feel annoyed. That's the emotion. And it's the thought that why does he do that? So your thoughts and your emotions are linked. So now let's say you decide, you know what? I'm going to take care of my own chewing, and my husband can chew like a cow or a dog, and I don't care. He's going to embarrass himself in front of other people, but that's not my problem. And if it's bothering me, it's my problem, not his problem. I am bothered, not he. So I'm going to tell myself, you know what? Actually, I enjoy that chewing sound. Let's hear it. And if you really can work your thoughts that way, or you set up a plan that every time he chews, he has to buy jewelry for you. Let's say just set a plan that every time he chews, he has to, at the end of the week, and go buy you some jewelry. All of a sudden, his chewing is going to be pleasing. It's like, come on, honey, chew. So that's what I mean with overlap of thoughts and emotions. And a lot of times is our belief system that trigger our emotions. And we do have control over our thoughts. And so we can choose to guide our thoughts one way or the other. And what we hear from other people, our daily experiences, form our thoughts, form our belief system, which then determines how we're going to feel. I mean, if somebody burns your finger, it always burns. And you can't think yourself out of it because, it burns. But most things, most enjoyments, like if you are a religious person and you go to church and there's chanting, you enjoy yourself, you're loving it. But if you're not a religious person, and you go to a church and people are chanting, it's like annoying to you. It's like, why am I here? This is silly. What are they doing? There's no God. What are they fooling themselves? See, your thoughts can determine whether you enjoy the chanting or get irritated by it. And one way to reduce stress is to choose your thoughts. You have a menu of thoughts options, and things that annoy you are your problem. I think this is a good way to think about stress reduction. Things that stress you is because of you deciding that they're bothering you. The example of chewing a spouse. You've decided chewing is bad. And but that's your thought, that's your choice. And it's not your husband's choice. And if you choose and you realize that, then you stress less.
Well, I know when I was looking at the connection with thought echoes and how we reframe our thoughts, that was a question. You basically answered it before I asked the question. Is that if you're able to step back and kind of observe what's going on, and so take a stressful situation or where you've had a trigger, whether it's a little one or a big one, and just say, oh, that was a trigger, and just take a pause on what the situation was and what happened and what your reaction was. It sounds like that reframing is very helpful. And as you said, you've got a choice to say, it's really important to me, and so I'm going to try to have a plan to change somebody else's behavior or perspective, or I'm just going to accept the fact that this is mine, and it's not mutually agreed upon, whether it's your partner or friends or family or whatnot. So that's uh, that's powerful. That's powerful. Thank you. Can you talk about some highlights? We talked a little bit about the genetics and with Alzheimer's, how that by 50, if your parents don't have Alzheimer's, then basically if your risk is lower. It's not that you shouldn't engage in those five pillars. But can you talk a little bit more about epigenetics influencing us in general? I think epigenetics is kind of having a moment in the popular, it's been in the scientific community, but more in the popular um, zeitgeist. Can you talk about that a little bit more for people?
Yes, sure. Just to clarify, it's not age 50 that is the boundaries of early onset Alzheimer's disease. Around 50s
Okay.
or maybe early 60s, but young people. So it's early onset young people around 50s and early 60s, and then old people late 60s, 70s, and 80s. So that's the distinguishing factor. So it's not exactly age 50. And then epigenetics is really fascinating to me because we used to think that our genes determine who we are and what we do. And over the years, we realized that, even if you have certain genes, the environment can compensate for it and to still have a better life, better choices, and so forth. But what we have come to appreciate is that our lifestyle and our choices actually affect the genes themselves. So the genes we have are not black and white, and it is what it is. Our genes can be modified through our lifestyle changes. Now, there are some genes that obviously are not modifiable. For example, the color of your eyes, it is what it is. Your lifestyle choices are not going to make your blue eyes brown eyes. But your perception of stress is also related to genes involved in regulation of emotions. And those genes, the genes, for example, that regulate the amount of corticosteroids in the brain and receptors for cortisol in the brain, those can be modified through lifestyle choices and what happens to us. Let's say, for example, that kids are expressed to trauma, childhood trauma. The childhood trauma can add little methyl groups. Methyl groups are small molecules that can be added to the genes in our DNA. And these little DNA these little methyl tags can then change the expression of these genes. So gene 1, 2, and 3 may be expressed at 20, 40, 60%. But when you put this tag, it may express at 10, 20, and 10%. So these little DNA tags affect the gene expression, not just, it's our lifestyle choices and the environment. They're literally tag, and by adding little tag, change the two-dimensional structure of the gene expression so that genes are not expressed. So this is an example of how environment can affect the genes. And what's new in this field is that these modified genes can then be expressed to the next generation.
Mhm.
So if your grandparents had a very rough life, I mean, it's not the same thing as like, had a car accident and, that's not going to change your genes forever. But if you lived in a stress environment for 20 years and you were stressed every day, that gene modification was pretty robust and then it gets transferred to the next generation. These are the new exciting factors. But this gene expression can also work the other way. When you exercise, when you eat better, when you sleep well, you change the level of these gene expressions in a favorable direction. So, for example, when you meditate for a while, that meditation removes more of these methyl groups that are already a part of the DNA machinery. And then by removing them, the expression is expressed more favorably, and you're going to have better brain functions. So the epigenetics works in negative and positive directions.
That's great. We could go on for hours, hours and hours and hours, and the book is just going to get consumed and marked up when it comes out in March, when the podcast is coming out. So I'm really excited for everybody getting a chance to participate with it. If you had one parting word of wisdom or piece of advice, what would that be that you would give people?
I think your behavior and your choices echo in your brain and change your brain. Um, and so you have control over your daily choices. You don't have control over other people's choices, but you have control over what you eat, how much exercise you get, how much you get sleep, whether or not you challenge your brain. And your daily choices make a huge difference on whether you get to your 80s and stay sharp or whether you get your 80s and decline and become demented. More than 90% of what happens to your brain in your 80s and 90s have to do with the choices you make throughout life. And midlife is a good point to reassess things and go through the things that are affecting your brain and choose the things that are going to rejuvenate your brain and sharpen your brain. And it's such a pleasure to go through your 70s and 80s and enjoy life. I think midlife is a new childhood, the way I look at it. I feel like, in the past 3 years since I retired, I'm a new person. It's like a new childhood. I'm going to take new dance lessons. I exercise more. I love giving lectures. I'm like a kid again. And I think people need to adapt that mindset. As Shakespeare said, it's a new childhood. Midlife is a new childhood. And think of it as a playground and have joyful approaches to day-to-day life and set aside the old-fashioned way of looking at aging as a downhill process. Look at midlife as a new childhood with tremendous possibilities in the future and look forward to tomorrow and the next year and the next year.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Beth. Take
Okay,
care.
take care. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of the Thought Echoes podcast, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing with a friend. It helps get the word out. Until next time, keep exploring the echoes that shape your world.